This is the story of a child named Jeremy Deck Matthews. I'm sure you haven't heard of him. No one has. It doesn't even really matter who he was, when he was, or even where he was. But I'm one of the few people he had in his life. Jeremy was a shut-in, forever barred in his bed by a disease unrecognized by doctors. His symptoms would seemingly change drastically every day, from excessive vomiting to the palest skin anyone's ever seen. His most common problem was simply staying awake. His body needed constant rest from whatever the battle inside him was, and therefore wouldn't be able to stay awake for more than an hour at a time. In his condition, he couldn't do anything except lay in bed and dream. Dream about the sunlight, about open grass fields and soft wind breezes, about what it's like to play with other children, about how it must feel to run arms wide open, to ride a bike, to swim in a pool or play sports. He wanted to be part of a life that he was unable to have. But instead, trapped by nothing but four walls and a doorway, which who would come through he would know all too well. You see, his parents didn't want him to know of anything in the outside world. They feared it would just make him depressed, so they never allowed him to see anything from the outside. Never a picture, nor a film. Not even a single blade of grass entered his pure white empty room, even by mistake. You might be wondering then how he knew of these things, how he could even dream about things he never knew of. Well, that's where I come in. It might have been a bad idea, but it was just something I had to do. Years ago, on a hot summer day, I decided to go hiking alone like I always did on summer breaks. There was an old forest about a few miles away from the city, so I packed my bag with some food and water and went on my way, hoping to find some cool souvenirs I could take home. The forest was dead silent, dragged on for quite a ways. There were spider webs and fallen trees scattered about. Didn't seem like anyone had been there for centuries. After a few hours, the sun was about to set and I was getting rather exhausted. I was about to head back home when in the distance I saw an old cabin. It was out in the open with dead and fallen trees surrounding it. Maybe it's abandoned, I thought. If I could just find something cool inside to take back home with me, that would make the whole journey worth it. I walked over to the house and approached an open window. I peered inside and to my surprise I found a child. Not much older than me, lying in a bed asleep. He had cold sweats and was shaking violently. The kid looked like death was just toying with him. I thought someone must have kidnapped him or something and just left him there to die. I couldn't just walk away from this, so I softly knocked on the window. He awoke quickly with a jerk. His eyes wide open, he tilted his rickety head over to see me. His body twitched as he opened his mouth a little. I wondered if I should have just walked away. This whole idea was already making me really nervous and unsettled. I tried to open the window with my hands to find out that it was unlocked. As I slowly opened the window, an odor of pestilence just rushed out. The sun was beginning to set now. Already knowing the answer, I mustered out, "Are you okay?" He seemed shocked to see another living person, and in a very low voice stuttered, "Who are you?" I was supposed to be home before dark that day, but Jeremy needed help. He and I spoke softly, and he told me of his life. He told me his name and of his parents, how strict they were for his safety. He told me how as a baby he was constantly diagnosed with different illnesses, until doctors finally gave up one day and wanted to test on him internally. His parents then took him and ran away to this isolated cabin where no one could harm him ever again. He told me how his parents used to give him an education and everything else he needed right there at the house. But when his father ran out one day, his mother broke down and tried to kill herself right in his room. Ever since then, she's been incredibly strict and very distant from her son, only going in his room to feed him. That is, when she remembered. He told me how he wonders what she does in that house all day, never making any noise or movements. It was almost as if she wasn't even there most of the time. But he told me he knew better than that. The only thing he was more intrigued about than me was the life I lived. He wanted to know what a clear sky looked like, what is outside his containment that he'll never get to experience. So I told him all these things. I told him about my social life and about my school. Made some complaints about how I really hated my teachers and how some of my friends were real pricks. But then I realized I really have nothing to complain about compared to this kid. We continued talking, and after a while he grew tired. I didn't know what I should do. I offered to help, to call the police or anyone here to help. But he refused, saying that he doesn't need any help, that he couldn't even sit up. His life was his own, and he was making the best of it. In his dreams. His dreams. He had so many ideas about what life outside would be like. Some of it was a little surreal, but others were quite accurate. He told me that just meeting me was the biggest event in his life and how happy it made him. He eventually dozed off with troubled breathing. I then took a look around the house afterwards to find that it was completely empty. Just absolutely ransacked, leaving only slight evidence that anyone ever lived there. He must not have had any real sense of time, and I wonder how long he'd been there, alone. I left my food and water by his bed and went home that night, planning on going back the next day. Early morning, I took some stuff with me: a soccer ball, an old Game Boy, stuffed bears, some more food and water, and some flowers that were outside of my house. I thought he might enjoy them. When I got there, I found Jeremy desperately trying to sit himself up in his bed, but he couldn't manage. I kept going over day after day, soon realizing that I'm the only one keeping him alive right now with food and water. I wanted to help, but he refused day after day. I really should have done something, but I just didn't. He could tell I was worried for him. So one day he told me that there's nothing that could ever make his life better now than just being with me. He said as long as he has his mom and me, there's nothing to worry about. I promised that one day I'll find a way to bring him outside, show him the city and anything else he ever wanted to see. And that we'll be friends forever. We both promised that day. Our friendship is just between us two, and will remain that way. November 8th, 1980. A 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck our city and destroyed my neighborhood. I didn't say anything. I wanted to, I really did. But my promise kept me. I shouldn't have listened. Why didn't I say anything? My parents and I were forced to move out of state within a few hours. Forced to leave Jeremy alone in who knows what condition. It's now the year 2001. I live alone in an old apartment a few 100,000 miles away from my old childhood home. I was Jeremy's best friend, and I let him down. So here I am, living the dream. My own house, my own car and job. These are my last words to whoever finds this. Because I'm going back. I'm going back to find him. I don't care what. I'm not coming back until I resolve this one way or another. I'll find some games. It'll be just like old times. Hell, I'll even hike my own way there on foot. I'm going to find some closure in this. I'm never gonna let another opportunity pass me by again. Goodbye.